broadcasting worldwide from a studio inside global headquarters of RP Enterprises in Kansas City.
Hey, gang!
Ladies and gentlemen,
Papa's home!
This is the Papa Ron Podcast
File transfer in progress.
with Ronnie Phillips and Jillian Gregg.
showtime.
Holy moly, we've gone more than 2 months without recording another podcast. Like, we're getting more regular. We're more regular. I actually said that. I literally just said we're more regular.
Said we're more regular.
And it's not from just eating salad. This is going to be a fun one, and it's also going to be a difficult one. It's an old friend that Jillian and I have known for many years from our days at working at Q104, and we're really excited about episode 40 of the Papa Ron Podcast, brought to you by Brown Piercy Cattle Company and Clean AF, and we'll get more into detail about them in just a moment. But welcome to episode 40 of the Papa Ron Podcast. Old friend from Nick and Jake's, Kevin Timmons.
Wow. And the crowd goes wild.
What an intro. What an intro.
Whoa,
There you go.
hey.
It's like a Chiefs Arrowhead.
How about that? How are you doing, pal?
I'm good. I'm good. It's
I'm
quite a
so-
setup you got here.
Thank you. You like it? You like all these dead animals on the... I mean, you're a Texas guy. You've saw this
I'm
a time
good.
or two, right?
Oh, I'm good with that.
Are you a hunter?
Yeah. Did you ever get into hunting?
No, I did a little fishing. I do duck hunting with my partner, Doug.
You still do?
Yeah. Once or twice a year, I get up.
I did not know this about you. Right off the bat, we're learning something new.
Squaw Creek.
Yeah.
Mountain City, Missouri.
That's where I cut my teeth on duck
There
hunting.
you go. Bigelow, little town.
Yes.
Just west of Mountain City called Bigelow.
Yeah.
Population 621. And when I'm there, it's 622.
There you go. Awesome. So,
I think the only reason they have me go up is to cook dinner.
because you're the chef.
Yeah.
All right. And is that something that you picked up when you were younger down in because you come from Texas, right?
Yeah, everybody thinks if you're from Texas that you either play football or you hunt or you ride rodeo horses.
You do none of it, huh?
I didn't do either. I didn't do any of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me kind of set this up. Obviously, aside from you just being a good friend and you're, got a lot of great stories outside of what we're, going to ultimately talk about. One of the reasons and the biggest reason why you're here is to kind of discuss mental health, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, because you had a tragedy in your life a few years ago with losing your son, Nick. And so we're going to dive into that just a little bit. But I kind of alluded to this earlier, where we met you from our days working at Q104, and then you became a friend of the cowboy, Mike Kennedy, and started doing a little advertising and promotions with Q104.
We had lots of singers and stuff out at
Wil Jenny's.
Wil Jenny's.
Yeah.
So whatever happened?
fun
Why? So Wil Jenny's, what happened there?
Well, we kind of effed up the first year. We didn't have the right menu. And we had more of a Mexican menu, and we didn't really dive into the barbecue the way we should have. And we knew we were good at barbecue, but just felt like everyone up here did barbecue.
Right.
The theme was steaks, Mex, and barbecue.
Okay.
And we didn't dive into the live music at first.
Yeah.
The building was big. The building sat low. Whenever you drove by it, you really couldn't see the cars. You couldn't see what was happening. We had some great entertainment, but we only had 80 seats. So when you're paying to get, a good B player or a C player like Travis Marvin. No, I didn't say that. Travis started at Wil Jenny's, his first ever gig, and when he was playing, he had the words on the little iPad in front of him.
Yep.
And so I was sitting with Mike Kennedy, and after his first set, he walked over and I said, "Hey, Travis, I want you to meet. This is Nikki Pace, and this is Mike Kennedy." And Travis goes, "What? What the hell?" And he pulls me aside. He goes, "Why didn't you tell me Mike Kennedy was going to be here?" And I said, "What would you have done differently? Learn the words." And ever since then, I've had a brotherly relationship with him.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
But he's done very well. He's done very well.
Good friend.
So Wil Jenny, it was right next to Nick and Jake's.
Yeah.
How long was Nick and Jake's open before you started Wil Jenny's?
About 7 years.
Okay. So what was the concept or the idea behind opening up a second store?
We thought, it'd be easy kind of for me to manage both at one time, kind of sharing a parking lot. We had some great events. We had some great food. We finally figured the menu out, finally really figured out, how to bring Texas barbecue up to Kansas City. People in Kansas City were starting to get behind it. The building was enormous. The taxes on it, the rent, and it wasn't built very well. There was just always, every single year, there was just huge maintenance. And just to give you an idea, the day that we closed Wil Jenny's permanently, that following week, Nick and Jake's was up 35%.
Wow. So
we were cannibalizing ourselves. We knew we were, but we didn't realize to what extent.
Yeah, that's a big number.
And honestly, both restaurants are sitting there doing good, doing above average, but neither of them really making any money. And we were just killing ourselves. I mean, really, literally just rolling our sleeves up every day and never taking a day off. Finally, Nick and Jake's is our brand, and that's where we're at.
Very successful. Let's go back then before what you alluded to earlier. You come from Texas. What brought you to Kansas City?
That site. So I was in Atlanta doing a upscale restaurant called Jody's Oak Room and the Tavern at Phipps. If you're from Atlanta, I had both. I was a general manager, and my favorite hangout place was about a mile from my apartment, Digger's Sports Bar. And that's where I met Doug Watkins, the hunter, the Goose Lore Lodge, Bigelow. Yeah. Doug Watkins. So Doug, and he had a great, it's very similar to a Johnny's, great food, great sports, clean, just very well run. And mine was white tablecloth. And we said, why don't we dip your chocolate in my peanut butter? At the time, he wanted me to work for him. And I said, I don't really want to do that. I got other things I wanted to do before we get together. And I ended up in Chicago doing a real upscale, like I had to wear a suit every night to work, place out in West Chicago. Big steaks, big wine list. Kevin Costner and Jack Nicklaus, the golfer, and Robert Wagner were all partners in this place. So it had a lot of money behind it. Kept in touch with Doug. At some point, I realized what a successful restaurant can make. And after about 3 years in Chicago, we just kept in touch with Doug. In between that job in Chicago and my working for that restaurant in Atlanta, where I met Doug, I worked for Applebee's. So I was a regional manager for Applebee's, and they were flying me here once a month. So I got to fall in love with Town Center, Yaya's, Yahoo's. I got to fall in love with all the local places. The old Tanner, the old Patio Quigley's. Yeah. Got to meet some of those people. And so when we decided to do it, we found the location 135th and Metcalf. Doug's family was from here. They bought the land, built the shell. I had saved some money, and Doug and I went in as partners on the concept. So that's how we ended up here. Wow. Odd. I know you're going to ask me, where'd you get the name? I know you know, but when we were putting the thing together, we couldn't figure out what to call it. And I had like a handful of magazines, and I had a file, and I had a 3-ring notebook, and I brought it down to Atlanta. And Doug had a box full of ideas, and we went to meet this graphic artist who was kind of working with us. And we were going to go into this office for however long it took, and we're going to come out with a name. So it was the wintertime. I had a coat. I remember I was taking my coat off, and the gal's name was Ursula. And she says, hey, what's the name of your son? And I said, Nick. And she goes, why don't you call it Nick and Jake's? Because Doug's son was Jake. I hadn't even got my coat off. I hadn't even unloaded my boxes, and she goes, why don't you call it Nick and Jake's? And we both looked at each other like, oofda, Yeah. Boom. Wow. There we go.
Well, just for fun, do you recall some of the names you were kind of leaning towards before you ultimately called it Nick and Jake's?
We were stumped between, is it a bar and a grill? Is it a bistro? Is it a tavern? Is it we were using Roadhouse, peanuts on the floor. We had all kinds of things that we wanted to do. But what we knew we wanted is we wanted one side to be kind of upscale, Sinatra, jazz and steaks and wine. And the other side, we wanted to be a horseshoe bar, sports bar. Yeah. And so Jake's side was and Nick's side was the quieter side. So, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I didn't know all that story. I mean, I knew it was your son's, but I didn't know all of that.
Yeah.
Well, and then the same concept applied then when you started Wil Jenny's.
Right. So Jenny, you know very well.
Sure.
She's an intern for you. So Jenny and Wil both wanted their own restaurant. So
The other kids.
Did they feel left out?
The younger
they
kids.
felt left out. So Wil Jenny's became a thing, and it worked. To this day, I wish we would have opened it better. I wish we would have opened it in a different geography, and I think we would not only still be open, but we might have several of them in town. So.
Yeah.
Can I tell you my one of my biggest memories, only because it was humiliating at Wil Jenny's for me, was that I was doing a live broadcast for the radio station for Q104 at Wil Jenny's. It would have been within a couple weeks, I think, of a Kenny Chesney show at Arrowhead. It was the day of the Kentucky Derby.
Oh.
The broadcast was.
Yeah.
And the live broadcast was from 4 to 6. What time is the Kentucky Derby?
At
5?
5:45. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, it is at 5:45?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, whatever the exact time was of the Kentucky Derby, I knew nothing about I knew it was horses and I knew it was big hats, but I didn't know anything. I didn't know.
What else is there besides horse racing and
Well,
big
I'm
hats?
going to tell you what I
Okay.
should have known that I didn't know. I had already said what time I was going to draw for tickets. And Ronnie knows this. Like, I was a stickler about, like, if I say this is what I'm going to do,
Yeah.
then, like, I don't want to say it and then change it if there's no reason to. So I was getting ready to do the drawing, and it was for the people in the bar. So I'm on the microphone in the bar, not on the radio, making an announcement like, oh, we're going to draw. While the Kentucky Derby, they're like getting ready to, what do they do? Shoot a gun to start it? I don't even know. Like blow a horn? I have no idea.
There's a trumpet and they
I don't know.
load in.
But this lady, I can still see her like death stare face at me, was like, can you just wait a couple minutes to do this? Like, we're trying to watch the race. And I was like, sorry, no, because I didn't know that the whole thing lasted like 90 seconds or 2 minutes or something. And I'm like, I'm thinking like football game, like, or NASCAR race.
Yeah.
Like, I have no idea this whole thing is over in 2 minutes or less.
I remember this, and it was also Cinco de Mayo.
Yes.
You were there. It was Cinco de
Yes.
Mayo, and I think you understood Cinco de Mayo, but I don't think you
Yes.
understood that.
There was
part.
a lot going on that day. Wasn't
Yeah.
that the same day as the Pacquiao Mayweather fight too that night?
So we
Maybe.
had so we had a 6,000 square foot tent in between Wil Jenny's and Nick and Jake's, and we had I forget the name of the band. We had a headline band, and that fight was going on, and we were worried because everybody wanted to go see that fight.
Sure.
Well, something happened with the fight. All I know is all of a sudden we had a line of people to get in. We were full. We had a line of people to get in because they said they were at 8:10 zone, and the fight got postponed, or I can't remember what the reason was, or maybe it was over immediately or something like that.
No, it went the distance.
And then everyone came over. I can't remember what the terms were, but yes, that was a fight night too.
Yeah, I remember there was a lot going on that day, but you really ruined that woman's year of.
Well, and anybody that was in the bar watching the Derby, because I was talking on the microphone the entire time, like almost the entire, and I didn't know it. I was like, get over it, lady. This is going to take like a minute and a half.
right.
And that was going to be the whole, and I had
so
no
does the
idea.
horse race. Yeah.
I didn't know. And so like every time that I hear the Kentucky Derby or that comes up, or I hear Wil Jenny's, like that's what pops into my head is like, I was 30 some years old at the time. I don't even know what year that was, but I'm sure I was over
I
30.
bet that was about 10 years, 10, 11, 12, I don't know, 11, 12 years ago maybe?
I didn't know.
A good segue to mental health.
Yeah.
We need to get you some therapy.
Yeah, I know. Some like minor trauma. Just minor.
Oh my
Made
gosh.
an impact, but
That's funny. You moved to Kansas City what year?
Moved in 99.
99.
Opened in
And so-
2001.
Okay. And at that point, your children are both born, or
Yep.
okay, and
So-
they're how old at that time?
Jen was probably 7 or 8, and Nick
Okay.
would have been 4 to 5.
Okay.
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Wow. So that's all they knew was the restaurant business, and Nick being 4 years old, all he knew was Kansas City, right?
Yeah, it's one of the best Nick and Jake stories of all time was about a year before we opened, and we were just started excavating, and how they excavate and they make a big mountain of dirt.
Yep.
So I was in town buying a house, and I brought Nick over to look at the site, and Doug was there and Jake was there, and Nick and Jake run up climbing up to the mountain or throwing rocks, and they're climbing up and rolling down. They're climbing back up and rolling down. And Doug and I are sitting there talking. We're talking with the contractor, and then Nick and Jake come running up to us, and they got dirt all over in their fingernails and their face, and and they go, "Dad, this restaurant's going to be great."
Oh my gosh, I love that. They were right.
Yeah. That's
right.
It's not just going to be a mountain of dirt. Although sometimes
gosh.
it's a mountain of dirt. So
Obviously, family business. I remember all the things that we were doing out there, and of course, what we were doing was mostly with Wil Jenny's, but the kids were always around. And so was there any desire for either one of them to kind of follow in Dad's footsteps?
Well, Jennifer is now running a good part of Nick and Jake's.
Good for her.
The marketing, the training. She's a digital media genius, and she's responsible. Well, I'll tell you what, during the pandemic, we had a human resource person, and we're like putting the brakes on everything. She kind of got us started into the pandemic, and we really didn't have a need for her. My partner, Doug, went behind my back and hired Jennifer. Jennifer was a digital media manager she was a digital marketing manager for P&L District for all 10 restaurants down there.
I did not know that.
So she was running that. They laid her off.
Right, because everything was closing.
Right.
Yeah.
Doug hired her behind our back, and then she brought us into touchless payment.
Yeah.
Ordering online.
Yeah.
All that stuff. And it was awesome. And she really did a great job, and she's still with us now. And then now Jake got an accounting degree. He got a I think a master's in accounting, and he's working for one of the big accounting firms. And
Good.
maybe the two of them come back together someday and run it.
That'd be really cool.
We'll see.
We have roughly an hour with you, and we're already 17 minutes into this. So I want to be able to get into the meat of this. And I'll be honest with you, KT, Jillian and I, since we've been doing this, we strive to say a prayer before we do each episode. And we did that before you came today. And one of the things that I prayed about, and I had shared with Jillian before we prayed, was that I was a little bit nervous. And I don't typically get nervous. The last time I was nervous like this was when I interviewed Greg and Missy Smith, the parents of Kelsey Smith, who was abducted and murdered several years ago. And, the reason for my nervousness is obviously not just because of the sensitivity of the subject, but also because of our friendship, and I know that you had said coming into this conversation that, you're open to speaking about everything. But if I get locked up in my words or questions, just know that I want to ask the right questions. And it's mainly wanting to ask the right questions because I want the right answers to be beneficial to those who could potentially be listening. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole purpose of this podcast. So let's dive into it. You lost your son, Nick. How long ago was that?
So 2017.
Okay. So. You lost him to suicide. Mm-hmm. And I guess let me just start off with the first question being, did you see signs? Was there signs there prior to this happening?
Well, of suicide? No.
Or just depression and the things that were associated?
Yes.
Okay.
Certainly he was abusing substances, mostly alcohol, but we didn't think any different than any other college kid. Although he had a couple brushes with the law, which not every college kid has. So he's got that working against him. He all the way through middle school, when I used to have conferences with the teachers, I can remember 2 times in middle school, the homeroom teacher got all of his teachers together, and it's not something they normally do. Normally when you have conferences, you go from room to room.
Yeah. But
all of them wanted to talk about Nick at the same time. And he was a little disruptive. He certainly had ADD. He certainly had, attention deficit issues. Mm-hmm. He wanted to be the class clown, and he was. One of the times when all the teachers were leaving after they, told us everything, the math teacher comes up to me and says, "Listen, I'm just going to tell you this between you and me. if I had to start a business and I had to pick one person in this entire school to be my salesman for that business, it'd be your son. And I mean that. And he's an incredible kid. But we knew he had depression and anxiety. We worked through high school with med control. And at the time, that's what it was. It was med control, and I wish it was different. He was seeing a psychologist who could, and a nurse that could prescribe meds, but they really weren't peeling the onion back and really digging inside, knowing what was really getting at him. And then, as high school was finishing up, my wife at the time and I separated. He spent time in both houses. He kind of played each other against, that you've probably heard that story before. Yeah. And, he'd spend weeks at a time with me, weeks at a time with her, and decided he was going to go to Johnson County Community College instead of jumping in. He went to community college, did okay. Then he went to KU and did miserably. He partied with all of his friends, wasn't going to class. He pulled out, and sure enough, we're seeing signs of now there's substance issues with anxiety and depression, and that's not good. He he had some self-confidence issues, although
that's surprising to hear based on what the teacher's saying, that he was so confident and was like a good kid and with a kind of a salesman personality.
Yeah. No, the problem was a lot of his friends were excelling. They were excelling in whatever they did, and he wasn't. So I think it was affecting his confidence.
Gotcha.
He'd party with these guys. He'd party with them all night. And the thing is, they got up the next morning, went to school,
right?
And he didn't. And so he didn't know where his place was going to be in life. And I should have just picked up the phone and called one of you guys and said, "Listen, I think Nick would be the best, party DJ because his music, he always did the DJing, and he went on some great trips with us to Puerto Rico and Hawaii. And anytime the whole mix, and this is now with my mixed family, with my wife and her kids, they would all look forward to whenever we got in the car and Nick would Bluetooth in and do the DJing. Yeah. And it was awesome, and it wasn't even Bluetooth. There was a cord connected to his phone.
The auxiliary cord?
Right. Yeah, we had to have the cord long enough to go to the back seat.
Oh, funny.
So he'd dedicate songs to each kid, and it was just one of those things. But, when it happened, he was living with his mom. He lost a job. He lost a girlfriend.
What kind of job was he doing?
He did just an odd number of jobs, so I don't even know which one it was at that time. I think it might have been kind of a landscaping thing. And, anyways, he's walking down this tunnel and he's loses a job. He's out of school. He's got some legal problems, not crazy legal problems, but he got some legal problems. And loses a girlfriend, and just he's walking through this tunnel, and the tunnel's kind of collapsing. And if you look at the end of the tunnel, from the beginning of the tunnel, the opening is only this small, and the closer you get, the bigger the opening gets. And for him, he was walking through the tunnel, and the closing was getting smaller and smaller, and the light was. Imagine looking through a needle, the little hole in a needle, and. And all of a sudden, it collapses, and in a weak moment, and it's tough, man. I mean, there's not a day go by that you don't think about it. That's his picture on my phone. I look at him every single morning, first thing. There's not a day go by when you don't see that, and the problem with losing a child to suicide is that you carry it with you. Yeah. You carry it with you because you knew at some point you probably could have done something better. You probably could have made a difference. You probably could have changed his life. You probably could have seen things and acted on it. And that'll never change. The longer I go and the more people I talk to, it gets easier. I found that I have two roles now. One of them is championing with a great team, a group of volunteers for the Kids, raising money for mental health.
Yeah.
And the other is through, it started through my church, Church of the Resurrection, and Adam Hamilton and Karen Lempe, the senior pastor there. And, you know, I don't talk about this too much, but when Nick took his life with a belt and a noose. So when my ex-wife found him, I mean, it was already done. And she immediately called, and I ran over, and, you know, it's magnified. It's a horrible feeling, but it's magnified even more because then you got to wait for the police. You got to wait for them to do their report, and they got to measure things, and they got to take pictures, and they got to do the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then they push him off. One of my employees was a minister for Church of the Resurrection, and I guess Jennifer, somebody got in touch with him, and he called Adam Hamilton. Adam was traveling overseas, and right as they were pushing Nick out and into the parking lot and into the car, Adam called me. I mean, it was almost to the minute, like he knew. And he said that he's sending Karen Lempe to my house. She's on her way. And he asked me to let her into our house and let her into our hearts. And I had never met her before. I had seen her, you know, but never met her once. And our family kind of converged at my house, and she changed. She taught me about grief, and, you know, she didn't shove a lot of scripture down my throat at that moment. We said a prayer, we said a closing prayer, but during that time, she let everyone talk. She let everyone know that we can't carry this with us. This is a disease that you know, we've got to walk together as a family into this. We've got to walk through it. And she suggested that we open our house and our arms to people that would, you know, need comforting also. So she was there, 30 or 45 minutes maybe with one of her junior ministers. And as we were wrapping up, I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, I was having a hard time listening to her because I just wanted to go into my closet in my bedroom, shut the door, and just let it out. I mean, I did not want to be around anybody.
I was going to ask you that when this guy calls you that, and you didn't know him either.
Adam?
Yeah.
Oh no, I knew him. Adam's,
you knew Adam.
Yeah,
Okay.
you know Adam. He's the founder of Church of the Resurrection. I kind of assumed you guys knew him, so.
I'm familiar with the church.
Yeah.
Well, but still, when you know him, he calls and he says, "Hey, let this woman in your home." Like, my initial thought was, because I've not been through anything like that, so I just thought, were you like, okay, sure, great, or were you like, dude, do you even understand what's happening? Right? What just happened? What I just watched? What I just saw? Like, were you just automatically open to her coming, or were you like you said, you wanted to go?
Yeah.
And just get away.
It was the oddest timing of that phone call.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm getting in my car and he's calling, and you know, I felt like I had to answer. And I don't know. You know, we walked Karen to the door, Pastor Lempe to the door, and she says, "Listen, there's a lot of people that are gonna need you. They're gonna be hurting also." We opened the door, and there were 100 people in my driveway.
Wow.
And you know many of them. John Barnes, Brian Beaver.
Yep.
You know, just. And then,
do you remember?
And then later that day, 50 of Nick's friends come over.
Was that overwhelming for you, or was it tough, or was it helpful? Or is it maybe a combo of both? I mean, I'm trying to understand what that emotion would have been like.
It was tough. It was overwhelming, but I'm trying to think of what it would have been like if she didn't come over to the house. I'm trying to think of which, you know, she gave me a direction. And if I had a different direction, who knows? I might not even be sitting here talking to you today. I got to be honest with you. I might not even be talking to you today. Adam called partly because he knew me and knew my family.
Yeah.
But Nick was the 6th suicide in 5 weeks in their congregation.
Wow.
Now it's the biggest congregation
Huge.
in Kansas City. So, but when Karen did that funeral, it was the 6th funeral in 5 weeks for suicide. Adam and Karen had called me and a couple of the other recent parents, and we had asked us to get together, and we did, and then we set up a grief group within the church, and I mean, for a year and a half, every Thursday night we would attend this, and every single time I didn't want to go. I did not want to go. The same thing. The same feeling. I didn't want Karen to come over my house that day.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go, but every single time, and usually my wife Annie and I would go together every single time. From the moment we leave the parking lot to the time we got home, I couldn't stop talking about it. Like, it just creates, the more you talk about it, the more you experience other people's losses. And then comes the part where for the last 6 years, I've been, along with, the For The Kids and mental health and raising money and Children's Mercy Hospital and all the things that we're doing on there. I think my biggest personal role is in helping others grieve.
Yeah.
And I don't look forward to that call. Oftentimes it just starts with like Adam often will send Annie and I a message that, hey, we lost somebody in the congregation, so-and-so, and he'll get us an address, and I'll just, from Nick and Jake's, just bring food over to the house and let them know that I'm available. And oftentimes they call back, and we'll end up having coffee, or end up just talking and letting them talk. And, I never had professional therapy.
I was going to ask you if you have.
No. And I don't know that I really needed it. Believe it or not, I don't know that I needed it until recently. And I think the grief group with all of the parents there were 100 people at the first meeting, the grief group meeting, 100. Wow. And these are people that were grieving from years. They opened it up, and there were people that were grieving, and it was all suicide, but from 10 years earlier. There was an amazing man named Dick Cray in town who owned Premier Beverage, and huge distributor in town, and he succumbed to it. And I had never met his family. I didn't go to the funeral. I didn't understand suicide. And his whole family was at that, and joined us for about a year. I got to see them every Thursday night, and we all kind of grew through it. And people would kind of peel off when they felt like they were ready to not have to be there. And we stayed on board until it kind of just, and fortunately there's been less suicide. So
I want to ask what I feel like is maybe a silly question. I don't know. And I want to talk about, you said you didn't think you needed therapy until recently. So I definitely want to get to that. I'm sure there's a difference in the grief of losing someone to suicide as opposed to anything else. But for maybe someone who hasn't lost someone close to suicide, what is the biggest difference? Or, because somebody listening now may have lost someone some other way, or to suicide, or maybe that's something that they'll deal with in the future. What is the biggest difference?
Well, number one, it's going to be sudden. There's a lot of deaths that happen that are sudden. But the big one is that everyone, including old girlfriends of Nick's and his buddies that came, and every single one of them felt some sense of guilt. Like we knew Nick wasn't right. We knew there was something, and didn't do anything about it. And that's where, there's still a stigma. There's still a stigma where we can't talk about this.
Yeah.
But in 2017, there was a stigma where, they may have seen signs and I may have seen signs in Nick, but there was such a stigma that, well, that'll never happen to Nick. He'll never do that.
Yeah.
And, I hope that parents out there understand that it could happen. It
Right.
could happen. And
Right.
over the silliest of reasons too.
And then the follow up on Jill's second part of that question is not knowing that you needed therapy until recently. Was there a certain event or something specific that happened that kind of allowed you to come to that realization?
Yeah. I really haven't talked to anybody about this except my wife. And I talked to Ryan Lefebvre about it yesterday, Jill, because he knew there was something going on, and he called me on his way home from an event that we had. And Ryan, so I told Ryan that 4th of July weekend, we were invited down to Beaver Lake with 8 other families from our old neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And we had went the previous year. There were a lot of kids there, but we were only there for one day. And and there's 3 houses. They're all big houses on the lake. There's 2 next to each other and one around the corner. And these people opened their houses to, let's get the whole neighborhood back.
Yeah.
So
A reunion of sorts.
a reunion.
Yeah.
And one day is really about, cooking barbecue and sitting out on the dock and telling stories and drinking beer and boating and sea-doing and letting.
Yeah.
And then the next day they actually have games and competitions where the families compete against each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so we brought, the only one in our family that was available was little Josie. She's 16 years old. So we had one, but every other family had 2, 3, 4 kids.
Mm-hmm.
And on the dock the first day, it's becoming apparent that every one of those kids who are now out of college or finishing college or getting their MBAs or becoming nurses, finishing nursing school, or working for finance companies, working for investment companies, all successful kids.
Mm-hmm.
These were all kids that would have been Nick's age or even a little bit younger.
Wow.
And it hit me like a ton of bricks because Nick wasn't there. And I left without even telling my wife because I didn't know I just felt like I needed a moment. It was an hour and a half later where I was sitting in my bathroom of the room that we were in and just uncontrollably on and off crying and shaking and shivering. And it was like that moment there that I missed him more than ever. But it was a moment where I said, I need to take care of myself. And I feel like I'm giving, I'm always giving, I'm giving. And that's part of I even took a test, you take these personality tests and I'm a giver. I mean, that's one of the things I am. But I need to take. And oddly enough, Ryan Lefebvre wrote this book, and I know at some point you're going to read it. It's sitting right in front of you here.
Yeah, we had him on our podcast twice.
Yeah.
But
Well,
he
Ryan-
didn't bring us a book.
No.
I will
Yeah,
say,
that's pretty
Ryan,
cool.
in case you're listening,
Yeah.
I
Ryan-
didn't get the book till I went to Kevin's
Yeah, I
charity
knew he
event.
was. I knew you guys knew him.
Yeah.
But he had a similar experience,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
he outlines it in the book, and so I had kind of just mentioned it to him, and he felt like there was something wrong. So he called me, and we talked for about 45 minutes yesterday, and he and we're looking. My wife is knee deep in mental health too. I mean, we're just taking care. I tell you what she did was great. And she sits on panel. She's on the steering committee for Johnson County Mental Health, Friends of Johnson County Mental Health.
Okay.
And she immediately put Josie and Ella, who at the time I guess may have been 10 and 13 years old when we lost Nick, she immediately put them into therapy. She interviewed 2 or 3 people, found someone she liked. Immediately, within 2 weeks, they were seeing someone and didn't wait. And it was really incredible. My wife sat on a panel. There was 400 or 500 people at this panel, and she's on the panel with all the big insurance companies. And it came to the closing, and she talked about how she had put her girls into therapy, and that one advice she would have for parents is, with all the external things that kids have to worry about and teenagers have to worry about with these damn gadgets,
for sure,
and all the bullying and all the porn and all the things you're exposed to, and the lack of interpersonal relationships you're having.
Yep.
She suggests that parents, when they finish their pediatric training, when kids are done with their pediatric training, that you're going through whenever that age is, you're done with
pediatric care. Yeah.
That you find a mental health professional and start mental health care.
Wow.
And that's your usual thing.
And and make it a norm, and then, they may not need it. They may not need it. They may never need it. God help them if they don't.
Yeah.
They may never need that, but at least they're building a relationship. At least they've got a routine. At least they're a current patient, because right now the demand is for psychiatrists, psychologists, far exceeds the supply. If you've already got that, so if something does happen, if there
you're not sitting on a waiting list,
exactly,
or not feeling that. I mean, even just you saying that makes so much sense, because if you're talking about pediatric care, you're going in for checkups or a physical or whatever. I mean, think about how I'm sitting here and I have a regular, like an OB doctor that I've had forever, right? But I haven't gone for my annual exam for so long, and I already am feeling like, oh, I don't want to call because they're going to go, oh, you haven't been in a long time. All that stuff that you think that a kid's like, well, I need to talk. They don't even know maybe that they need to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
But if it's normal that oh, I'm feeling this way and I can talk to somebody, and it's a comfort level already with that person.
Yeah.
It's the same with a doctor. If you don't have a regular doctor and then something goes wrong physically, well, where do I start? Where do I start? And how well I can't get into that doctor. So that's a great point.
Yeah,
I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, and then if something comes along later and there is a situation or an acute situation, then you've already got a relationship. With the clinic.
That's great.
Well, the thing that I like about that concept is that it's already creating a culture of talking about it, opening up. And I still hesitate every time I bring this up, but again, this podcast was not because we wanted to live our old radio days, this was because I experienced something that was bigger than me and I didn't understand it. And it was because I finally opened up to some people who cared about me. They challenged me to do this. And in the process of that, I learned that internalizing is destructive.
Yep. So
that leads me to my next question. You had talked about Nick going to counseling and him kind of getting in trouble with the law and, substance abuse, I guess, or alcohol. What did those conversations look like? There's parents out here who are listening to this. I'm a parent. Jill's a parent. Did you, I'm certain that you had conversations. I'm not asking if you didn't, but what did he open up, or was he internalizing a lot of this?
He internalized. He did not ever want to go to, didn't feel like he needed it. Never wanted to go to these sessions. And these sessions became less about what he was feeling inside, more about how the medication was making him feel inside. He'd have, 20 minutes with the therapist alone and then 20 minutes with me and the therapist, and it's really about, okay, how we've adjusted your meds or we've changed your meds, and how are you sleeping? How are you eating? How are you? And she's asking him these questions. How are you? Are you groggy? Are you tired? How's your attention span? How's your school? I mean, she's just asking those kind of questions and never really getting into.
It seems like they're missing the root of the problem.
Yes. So, and unfortunately, I'd fall into that too sometimes. When we're having deep, important conversations, I'd ask them, okay, well, how's the medicine doing for you?
Right.
Worried more about the medicine and less about him.
That's what you're hearing the professional do too. And I'm not trying to bag on that person but I mean, now that what maybe needed to happen in addition to what she was doing.
Yeah.
I mean,
and he may have just been so stone cold to her that maybe that's all she could do is work on meds, for all I know. But Yeah, no,
So we never really got to or understood the root of the problem.
no. And, if he had OD'd or something, we didn't know if it was self-inflicted, I would have assumed it wasn't.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's my own.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the recent event with you at the lake was 4th of July weekend.
Yeah.
So that's been over 2 months ago. So have you done anything different? Have you?
Well, you just talked to Ryan the other day about this, right?
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, as far as like something regular.
Well, we haven't found a therapist. It takes time.
I know.
Sure.
You can't just jump right into
I know.
finding a therapist.
That's
so we've been
true.
kind of asking around a little bit. I did talk to Ryan about that specifically yesterday.
What about your church?
Well, that's been the best.
Yeah.
I mean, do they have counseling services in the church? I mean, a church that size, I would imagine they would.
That's a good question. The grief services were great. Once again, I ended up probably being more of, I felt like if I could make people feel better about themselves, that it would make me feel better, and it did.
Right.
Yeah.
Only short term. It's not,
Yeah.
it's all peripheral. It's
Right.
all on the outside.
Yeah.
It's not really deep inside. So, I think that the sheer fact that I was able just to talk to my wife about it. I mean, as soon as we were leaving the lake, imagine both car doors closing at the same time. We're not even out of the driveway to pull up the dirt road, to get onto the highway, to head back. I said, okay, I'm ready to talk to you about it. And that's the first time I've ever really had that kind of conversation with her. I've always kind of, I had friends that I thought were helping me when I first started. You might know them. A guy named Jim Beam, a guy named Jack Daniels,
Yeah.
a guy named Evan Williams. They were good buddies of mine during that time, but realized quickly as the grief group was starting that wasn't the way to go. I mean, I still have a martini every night, but it's not like that. But I will say that those would be people I'd be talking to about it in the darkness of night, just watching late night TV or something, and not my wife.
Yeah.
And so ever since we've had that conversation, I think we've been able to talk more. I think just having it happen, Ryan talked about triggers. Ryan talked about triggers of when he was in his darkest day, and when he hears music from those days, it triggers him.
Yeah.
So I told Ryan, I said, grief is a sneaky MFer, and that trigger of seeing all those kids successful, it blew me away. And man,
Can I ask this? You've obviously said that you felt triggered because you saw them and that brought back his memory and that made you miss him. But this is a tough question to ask. Have you forgiven yourself? Because you talked about the guilt as a parent and the things that maybe you could have done or done differently. Do you still carry guilt, and have you forgiven yourself?
Boy, that's a good question, and that's a very direct question. Nobody's asked me that, and I don't know if I know the answer to that.
And I'm sorry if it makes you uncomfortable.
No, man, this is a really strong question, because I don't know the answer to that, Ronnie. So much for me has just been trying to be the strong, trying to be the guy.
Yeah.
Trying to be the role model for others, and trying to tell myself that, hey, it's a disease. Trying to tell myself that you never could have found it, but you always know deep down inside that there's something you could have done differently. You always know that,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really know the answer to that question. That's good. Next time I see you, maybe I'll be able to dive into that a little bit more.
I hope for you and your ability to, because here's the thing, two things that I love. One, thank you for being here and talking about it, because that's huge. You even talking about what happened over the 4th of July. you can possibly internalize that, and it's just going to perpetuate the problem. The fact that you are talking about it, as uncomfortable as I'm sure it is, because even when I talk about my stuff, it just wrenches at me.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the fact that you're doing that. And then what you're doing with the organization, the foundation for the kids, that is so huge. They need the best version of you for you to be able to continue doing good work in that. And in order for them to get the best version of you, you've got to forgive yourself.
Yeah.
You've got to go, do the little things that are going to make Kevin healthy.
Yeah, you got to fix yourself.
And that's me as a friend talking who's gone through some dark stuff too, right? Like, I mean, I'm not a counselor. I am not qualified in many ways to be giving any kind of professional advice, but as a friend who loves you.
Yeah. Well, the reason when you go on a plane and you're going through the rules before takeoff and they tell you to put the oxygen mask on yourself before your child.
Yep.
I mean, there's a reason for that. And I thought I was doing all the right things, and I think I've done a lot of the right things. But,
sure.
But and this may just be it used to be the trigger was when I made pancakes in the morning. Nick loved pancakes. Or when I made breakfast tacos. It wasn't always breakfast, but I cooked breakfast for him every morning for all those years. Yeah. And it were just triggers of making meatballs, or just, for me, obviously it's all about food, but, there was a Sonic on 151st and Antioch that I almost kind of dreaded to drive by, because we stopped in that Sonic and after every baseball game or baseball practice, and we'd sit and we'd hammer a coney dog and have a drink, and we'd just sit and talk in the car, and it was, I look at that Sonic. I don't look at that Sonic as a Sonic. I look at it as, that's where we used to hang out. So
isn't that crazy how quickly a place that held, like, you didn't, like, when the memory was a good memory, you didn't realize how strong it was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Same with a song. Like, you can be like, oh yeah, man, we loved that song. But until it changes, until grief changes it, you don't realize how powerful it was, like the power that I had. So,
we've got about 7 minutes, 8 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about For the Kids, and get back. I mean, we've kind of briefed and touched on it a little bit, but let's get into the meat and potatoes of that organization. I mean, we naturally know how it kind of all came about, but how did it come about? I guess, as far as the logistics and the people that were involved to start it, and what is it that you're ultimately trying to do through events, or what events are happening throughout the year? Just kind of give us a broad overview, and because people that are listening to this might want to get involved.
Well, 20 years ago, we had a golf tournament, and it was a drunken sports bar golf tournament. And then we did it again and again and again. And each year we'd raise a little bit more money. And we'd started adding a raffle. And we thought, okay, we can make more money on a silent auction. And then we can make more money on a live auction. Yeah. And we only had 3 items, but it still made more money than the silent auction.
Yeah, of course.
And then in 2009, I was visiting a friend of mine, the Paydens, and their daughter at Children's Mercy Hospital, and Jennifer and her were the same age, so Jennifer would go with me. And we, she had Crohn's disease, so she was in and out of the hospital a lot because it's a hard disease to figure out. And so we went down a couple times and fell in love with the hospital, fell in love with the nurses, with the colorful walls, with the with the open windows and the airiness and and so I asked one of the nurses, I said, hey, I got a golf tournament and we're looking to change it around. We just want to put a smile on a kid's face. What can we do? Here's my number. And so she sent me this message with all these different medical devices that they could use on their floor. And I said, well, I really want to put a smile on a kid's face. And I think I figured out what we're going to do. So we bought a Panasonic Tough book. We bought 4 of them in 1 year, and they were about $4,000, $5,000 each. Now, a Panasonic Tough book is the ones that are military and the police use, and it could be disinfected. So, I mean, you could spray it, clean it.
Gotcha.
So there were 4 of these books, 4 of these laptops that were in a closet, and families could check them out, and they can get they can connect to the internet. They can start their caring bridges for their families. The kids could play games, and with the like $700 we had left over from that golf tournament, my daughter Jennifer went to a place called Blockbuster Video. Those of you out there used to be this cool place. I wish I had $1 for every minute I spent in a Blockbuster Video walking through the aisles.
No doubt. I love that place.
Or the money that you could get back from all the late fees did.
Yeah, right. So she went, and this is a high school kid or middle school kid, I guess at the time. She went and talked to the manager there and said, "Hey, I have $700. Want to get some videos for Children's Mercy Hospital." Where he pulled together 500 videos.
Wow.
And created a library in another closet at Children's.
They're on
so
Blockbuster?
So kids could do these. And they were DVDs. Cool. They weren't videos.
Yeah.
They were DVDs.
Right.
Yeah.
So they can fit into the thing. So then the next year and then my buddy Dan Beitler with George Shaw got involved. You guys know Dan.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he thinks pretty big. And then, next thing you know, Tom Watson's getting involved. And next thing you know, we're buying, and then iPads come out.
Yeah.
And instead of buying these things, we're buying iPads for $900 a piece. Yeah. And we decided to put an iPad on every single bed in Children's Mercy Hospital, both south and downtown. So now there's an iPad. There's 5,000 movies and games that they can check out. Yeah. And there's the doctors would go in, they'd get on the internet, and they'd show kids where they're going to be and what they're going to be doing, and talk to parents using the iPads. And then we did a canine endowment, 10-year canine endowment, which has been extended. So there's dogs and walking the halls up there, making kids happy. We were touring, and there was a little guy who had the dog on his bed, and the dog's name were Hope and Glory, and Hope was on the bed with him, and he had to go get a dialysis. And so he went to go get the dialysis. He didn't want to go. He didn't want to leave Hope, but the nurse made sure that Hope was on the bed when he got back.
Oh my gosh.
So it's, and then we started buying ambulances, and we're starting to raise big money. We bought 3 ambulances in 2015, 2016, and then we lost Nick and pivoted to mental health. I can tell you that we're no longer a drunken sports bar golf tournament. As you saw the other day, we're a full-on foundation. We have an executive director. We have hundreds of volunteers. We do events throughout the year. We have an event coming up in October. It's our golf tournament. We play on 2 courses. And we've got a full entertainment package in the morning before they go. Kids from KC Acapella and sing a couple meaningful songs, and then we kind of do a little housekeeping on what's going on with For The Kids and tell them where the money's going. And then afterwards we have an auction, and we have kids come out and sing again. This year, and Tom and George Brett and David Faraday twice.
Wow.
David lost his son the same year we lost our son, so David is a part of us. And Bill Self last year and this year are hosting the auction.
Nice.
So Bill's bringing 4 of his players out, and after the auction, he's going to do a panel discussion with his players, talking about their mental health and talking about how they balance their gadgets and their electronics and their social media with their families and their lives and their education and what things are going on with them. And they're preseason number 1, so that'll be just a pretty cool event. But the auction's big. We raised $1.5 million last year for the tournament.
Unbelievable. And
the year before is 1.2. We lit the fuse, and these are Tom Watson's words. We lit the fuse at Children's on mental health. So Children's been around for 100 years, 100-something years. One of the pillars on their strategic plan now is mental health.
That's awesome.
It had never been a part of their strategic plan, or a major part of their strategic plan, I should say. And now it's one of the pillars. And we opened the Depression and Anxiety Clinic for Youth, or the Day Clinic, last year. And they're seeing kiddos from around, all around Kansas City. And Children's made a major announcement on a capital campaign called Illuminate, and they've committed to 2 mental health hospitals. One, I think, kind of maybe close to the main campus. Geographically, I'm not sure where it is. But the second one will be in Olathe, and it's a partnership with KVC, which is an incredible fostering program.
Yeah.
So we're, and we're just a small part of that. I think we maybe had a little bit of kind of, let's push it along.
Yeah.
But the leadership on the board, the leadership with the administrators, and Paul Kempinski at Children's Mercy are just really dedicated to mental health now. So, who knows? Maybe we're even offering that preventative maintenance that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not
Working on erasing the stigma.
Yeah, but maybe, people, parents and kids can start talking to people before they need it, before they get
the big
into acute
whatever it is.
situations where it's really affecting their school or affecting their friends and all of that. So, and now there's a full team. We have a full board. I serve as the vice chair. We recruited John Barnes to be
I love
the
how you
chair.
said recruited.
We did. He actually came on the board and helped us with the strategic plan, because he's just great with that stuff.
Sure,
Yeah,
he's really
great,
good at that.
And true story, his main home is in Dallas, and he came to a meeting and he sat with me before the meeting, and he says, "Listen, I'm going to be resigning at this meeting."
What?
And this was 2 years ago, and I said, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah, I just don't feel like I can be here. I'm, in Texas, and now I'm, done with Cisco. I don't even have a job here." And so through the course of the meeting, I nominated him to be the chairman of the board. And everyone agreed. And he goes,
way.
"Oh boy, Lori's going to kill me." And sure enough, he accepted it. But what he did is he provided 2 years of leadership.
Yeah.
Like I know he knew he didn't really finish what he had started, just to get the formalization of the board going. And now it's formal, and we just added 4 or 5 new board members. And we've got a succession plan. So he'll be the MC for this golf tournament in the morning, and hopefully you guys can.
Which is right up his alley. DJ
Oh,
Johnny
my gosh,
Barnes
of
on the
course.
microphone.
We might have to give him like a golden microphone.
There you go.
So he
Something.
comes back every year. So
So-
He was great when
Something.
we had him on the podcast here. He was a lot of fun to talk to.
So when and where is the golf tournament? And is do you need players still? Are you full? I assume I assume it fills up.
Yeah, it sells out. We do a 2-person scramble.
Yeah.
We play at Blue Hills and Country Club of Leewood. It's sold out. We still always use more sponsors. I mean, just every dollar, really. I mean, we underwrite the entire thing, so all the money's going to the good. And we've, silent auction items. I'm looking at a couple things in this room right here that'd be great silent auction items. Maybe if you can distract Ronnie, I'll grab one or
Right?
two of them.
On your way out,
Yeah.
you'd be like, "Hey, can you tell him there's something's falling down in the bathroom?
There's a Winchester side by side. Yeah. That says Ronnie Phillips on it. So
That's funny.
Yeah. So
I know some people. We could probably help you out with some items.
yeah, that'd be good.
Let me ask this, and I know we're pushing time here. We're at an hour and 3 minutes, or roughly. Is the beneficiary the same every year?
Yeah, it's Children's Mercy.
Always
It's
is.
mental health. This will be the last year where the money goes directly to the day clinic, the depression anxiety clinic for youth. After that, we will probably sign another 3-year agreement with them, where the money will probably go to one of the Illuminate projects.
And there's just one event a year, or do you guys have multiple?
Oh no, we had a breakfast the other day.
Yep.
Right.
Jill was
Yeah, I'm
there.
sorry I
and-
couldn't be there.
And that wasn't a fundraiser. That was more of a community. That's part of our strategic plan, is to do community outreach and so forth. We've got a bourbon raffle. It'll be February 29th, 2024, out at Ironwoods Park in Leewood.
Okay.
And last year it raised $147,000.
Wow.
And somehow, being in the hooch business in the state of Kansas. I've known all these guys I've got access, and really nothing really was donated. We have a small war chest, and me and a couple guys, we spend money on buying bottles and we try to get allocations. We try to find out when these allocations are coming out and try to buy them. A bottle of Pappy Van Winkle is only to the distributor, to a liquor store, is only $80.
Okay.
But on the secondary market and the thirdary market, or a bottle, depending on the year, a bottle of 12-year or 15-year or 23 is going for $10,000. And that's what it goes for in our auction.
What?
But we can buy it for hardly nothing.
What?
Now, the 23-year is probably a couple $100, but the 10-year is really not that expensive. And so we're able to try to gobble up these things. And then we get gifts from our donors that are traveling, and they'll text me from Kentucky. They go, "Hey, what do you know about Peerless?" I'm like, "Buy it." They go, "Okay, I'm buying some for your auction." I'm like,
wow.
"Great." So, this year we'll have Colby Gerholtz, James Beard Award-winning chef from Rye. Colby will be doing the food. Okay. And which is great. Now, it's not just a Nick and Jake's thing anymore. We're getting all these other restaurants involved. We do a pickleball tournament, and the guys at Chicken and Pickle give us the court, and they support us tremendously. Dave Johnson with Chicken and Pickle gives a lot. But, we sell golf balls at our restaurants for, you remember the old shamrocks? You buy a shamrock and you put it up, and it goes to muscular dystrophy.
Yeah.
Well, we sell golf balls, and we did it in just the one Nick and Jake's. Now all the Nick and Jake's. Now every Johnny's in town sells golf balls.
Oh, wow.
For the kids.
Wow.
And Ed Gieselman's Jose
cool.
Peppers, they do their own drive money for the kids. And then our good buddy Whitey at JT's in DeSoto.
Of course.
Yeah.
Shout out Whitey.
Called me the other day. When am I getting my golf balls? So,
That's so
it's
cool.
a thing. And the restaurant community is kind of really, really gathered around. And,
That has to be amazing to see that. Like, I'm just sitting here, and I'm not doing it, but like 20 years ago, would you have ever thought that somehow being in the restaurant business that you're in and working with alcohol distributors and all these things and connections and things that you have and have done and know and do are making the difference that they're making?
Yeah, it's changing people's lives.
Absolutely. I think they do. I think because
But did you know
real.
that?
Could you have ever imagined it?
I think it's because it's real, because they know. And that day when at Church of the Resurrection, as we were getting out, and I'll tell you this, I wish we would have had a meet and greet before, or whatever you call it, the night before. We didn't do that. And because afterwards everybody was there wanting to talk. And so I didn't get around but there were 10 different restaurant owners that brought food, and they had little stations all around. And it was just really nice. My buddy Jason Pryor owns Pizza 51. And by the way, that's where Andy Reid went when he got off the plane when they won the Super Bowl this year. So a little shout out to Pizza 51.
Love it. Where is it? I've not heard of it.
He left me a Cowtown pizza knowing it was my favorite. And he left it off to the side for me. And I ate that night,
so
probably
sweet.
the whole thing. I just feel blessed to have you guys. I feel blessed to have the friends, my wife, my family, my business partner, Doug, who's a silent partner. Literally, we will not see him. He might be on his way to Saskatchewan. I mean, he hunts those greenheads starting in Canada, follows them all the way here, then goes all the way to Arkansas and Oklahoma, takes them all the way through the season. So
probably passed him on a country road in Saskatchewan.
You probably have. So he I'm lucky that he is. Nick and Jake's, we don't advertise. All the stuff we did with Q104, some of it was paid, but most of it was in kind. Most of it was in kind between us. We do a little bit of in kind with Radio 810. We do.
Seren talks highly of you, by the way. I hear him talk about you all the time.
Yeah, we do a blue signs on the highway for directional signs. That's really our only advertising. Our money goes back into the community. So that's where we'd rather put it. And we feel like that money is we're not going to get the bigger bang for the buck, but we're going to get a lot longer lasting bang. And my business partner feels the exact same way as I do, and that's the way we've done it. And I'm lucky to have him and Lee and you guys. And I know we're going a little overtime, but
yeah, well, we'll get to wrapping it up. But I want to do a quick shout out to Whitey Whitney because you brought him up.
Yeah.
So, first of all, I was surprised when he told me at Mike Kennedy's stage dedication at the Power and Light District a couple weeks ago that he's listened to the Papa Ron podcast.
Okay.
Because I realize it's not for everybody. I mean, there's some topic, we'll have Trent Green on or Louis Aguiar, and some other sports things. So it's not about mental health all the time, but there is a faith-based foundation to this podcast, and we definitely talk about difficult things. And that was, again, because of my experience. So I guess I was a little surprised that Whitey had told me that night that he had listened to it, but then he quickly turned and said, "You really need to have KT on." And I thought about you before, but truthfully, I was scared. I was scared because of, naturally our friendship and having known you over the years. And I felt like I was scared that by asking you that it would be maybe riding the coattails of a tragedy. That's how it would appear for me asking you. All that to be said, I then worked up the courage that night and came and talked to you, shared you a little bit of my testimony. And I am incredibly grateful that you took the drive to Arkansas.
Yeah.
As you joked about in your text message.
I told you it was Greenwood.
Okay, I'll be there at 1:40. Okay, I'll be there at 1:50. Where the hell is this place?
South Summit. Way out.
Well, you made it to RP Enterprises, global headquarters. I appreciate that. Anyway, seriously, not only as a friend, but as a person who's an advocate in the mental health space, I really appreciate you and your vulnerability to not only talk about something that is so sensitive and hurtful, because of how close it was to you, but how important, obviously, there's a lot of power and there's a lot of things that can be gained in turning a negative into a positive. And I think that that's what I'm trying to do. It's obviously what you're trying to do. And I think that when you combine collective efforts and you surround yourself with the right people who have the same mindset, same vision, a lot of great things that can be done. So I'm grateful that Jill came out yesterday. I'm sorry I couldn't be there, but know this. We're fans of you. We're friends. We want to be a supporter in any way that we can. And if there's anything that we can do, please don't hesitate to reach out to either one of us.
Well, I think you both said some of the most profound things that I've heard in the last 6 years. You've asked me some questions and you've said a few things that, you're not going to be a good leader unless you take care of yourself. And nobody said that to me, I guess, Yeah, I think my business partner does. I think my business partner does a little mental health check with me every now and then. And I usually play it off as everything's good. So, but he's like, take the time to make sure you're okay. And you have to.
Yeah. Internalizing is destructive, but on a more positive note, man, I think that there are some people based on your episode 40. And so of the 40 episodes, I know that they're based on the feedback that I've gotten from prior ones. There's going to be people who are going to have listened to this. They're going to have gained something from it. And that's because you put yourself out there to do that. So that's making the situation bigger than you and your personal feelings. And I couldn't be more grateful for that.
Well, I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Hey, obviously you're a meat eater, right?
Yeah.
You're a meat eater.
Yeah.
So Brown Piercy Cattle Company is a proud sponsor of the Papa Ron podcast, and they've been breeding registered Angus cattle for generations with one thought in mind: quality beef for consumers. Their goal is to deliver prime graded beef directly to customers' homes more affordably than you can purchase them at the store. That's better beef conveniently delivered at a lower price than the grocery store. You can find them online at brownpiercycattle.com. And you're going to get yourself 4 premium thick cut steaks, 4 of their famous steak burgers, 2 family size roasts, and 4 pounds of 93% lean ground beef, all from Brown Piercy Cattle Company. How about that?
That is phenomenal.
Hopefully that's worth the trip to Arkansas.
That is phenomenal. Nothing like Angus beef.
Whoops, I'm hitting all the wrong buttons here. Anyway, for Jillian, Greg, For Kevin Timmons from Nick and Jake's, I'm Ronnie Phillips. That's episode 40 of the Papa Ron Podcast.
You've been listening to the Papa Ron Podcast. If you enjoy this podcast, hit subscribe now on the podcast platform. Follow the Papa Ron Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok.
And while you're there, like, comment, and share.
Until next time, thanks for listening to the Papa Ron Podcast. Papa Ron Podcast. Papa Ron Podcast.